Welcome to The Author Show, where we present new authors and books. From fiction to self-help and everything in between, you'll find it all here. To watch the TV version of our program, visit authorswebtv.com. That's authorswebtv.com. And now, let the show begin.
Hi, this is Linda Thompson, your host for The Author Show. When family disapproves of a person's desire to break out of the "it's always been that way" mold, what happens to that person? That's the premise of today's book, What We Set in Motion, set in the turbulent 1970s when almost everything was turned upside down. Stephanie Austin Edwards is the author of What We Set in Motion, and she joins us today to tell us about her debut novel. Stephanie, welcome to the Author Show.
Thank you, Linda.
Stephanie, will you give us a short synopsis of What We Set in Motion?
Well, I think you started it right then, and it is the story of a young woman, although it could be a young man, who at the end of college is at a crossroads. What can I do with my life as opposed to what am I going to do with my life, which we might say today. In those days in the South, it might have been a bigger challenge for a young woman to say, I don't want to stay home. I have other plans and a bigger life in mind. And Nadine Carter Barnwell does have a bigger life in mind. And she wants to tell her daddy that she is not staying to run the family business and keep up the family name. She, in fact, wants to flee to New York City to become a dancer. Totally the opposite of what her daddy envisioned for her life and his life.
Sometimes daddy is not always best, is it?
That is true.
Is there any other author you think may have influenced your writing style?
Well, I definitely think Pat Conroy influenced my writing life. I'm not going to say so much my style. Pat Conroy and I did go to school together, so I had known him. Unfortunately, he just passed. I had known him for quite a long time. He inspired me to look within and go back to my earlier writing life and try and develop it. But authors that I really, really love are Ann Patchett, Anne Lamott, Catherine Strockett, and Sue Monk Kidd. Really, really like those authors.
Stephanie, while writing your book, did you picture any specific type of reader?
Originally, of course, like a lot of authors, everyone. But then I did narrow it down. I do think it goes from the end of high school, where we're, again, making a decision. Where do we go? What do we do at this point? Really, all the way up through seniors. Everybody can look at the times in their life when they had these crossroads and these decisions to make, and did they really focus on making the best decision, or did they just let it all flow?
Was there any particular incident that served as the inspiration for your plotline?
I think more the fact that I did spend 22 years in New York City as a dancer and a costumer. I was in the depths of theater, and I had a great observation of everything that was going on around me. And I just loved watching how it all worked. But I also loved watching the people who were successful and the people who were not successful. And I think when I came down to writing this novel, which I have probably written 3 novels in the time it took me to write this one, as I kept waiting for it to gel, that I wanted to have a story about how we make our decisions and where we go with them.
Why did you set your book in the 1970s?
I think perhaps because it was a turbulent time. It was a little bit less chaotic than today in some ways, but we also had less communication available to us. And with less communication at our fingertips every second, it's interesting how things can play out in that environment as opposed to today where we know everything about everybody all the time.
Please explain the meaning of your book cover. It's a beautiful illustration, but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
Thank you for asking about that, because I just love my book cover. And it was designed by a book designer who is in Oregon. I've never met him face to face. And when I described if I could actually make the painting or the drawing or the graphic of this, I would have Nadine, my protagonist, going up the river to the fish camp where she's going to meet with her Aunt Amelia to help her decide what she needs to do with her life and what she can do next. And so you see her going up the river, you see the giant live oak trees coming across the side, but off into the distance you see her dreaming of New York City. There's a faint silhouette of New York City on the horizon. And then up above are all the birds that are always in motion, and she wishes she could be as free as the birds.
That's a really nice story. Now I understand the book cover a whole lot more, and I like it even better than I did at first. So, are your characters modeled after people you know, or do they come straight from your imagination?
I think it's a combination in that none of my characters are any one person, but as an observer, as most writers are, you pick and you pull, oh, that characteristic from that person would gel well with that characteristic from that person. And you might have seen them, known them, observed them, and never talked to them. You might have read about them in an article or seen it in a movie. And somehow, as you're writing the story, or as I'm writing the story, these characters start taking on all those little aspects of this, that, and the other thing. And then other characters are called in from who knows where, and they appear on the page.
Will we see Nadine in a sequel or a series?
Right now, you won't see Nadine, but you will see one of the other characters, which I can't tell you about yet, in the next book that I'm working on.
The Old South was known for very strong women. Is that why you put Nadine and her family in Lowcountry, South Carolina?
Well, I actually went to high school here, although I wasn't born here. So I have a very strong affinity for the Lowcountry of South Carolina. I do believe that there are a lot of strong women around here, but I love the idea of going from this sheltered, very comfortable life she had. She's not fleeing something uncomfortable to something that she has a burning desire to do, but on the other hand, it's going to be uncomfortable to then start over in this new life with no money.
Well, you mentioned Nadine's daddy being the one that did not want her to pursue her goals. Did Nadine have a mama that just kept quiet?
No, unfortunately, her mama had died 5 years before, and she was an only child. So although Nadine reflects back on if mama had been here, she would have seen things differently. She would have helped me out with daddy. She would have helped me out with his hard-headedness. But the mama, she doesn't have a mama. And the daddy, once you get into it, you're going to realize that the daddy is suffering still, too, from the loss of his wife.
What makes What We Set in Motion stand out in a crowd?
Besides the cover, which, again, I think is absolutely gorgeous, I think that the story is a very, very positive story, but it takes you through the struggles that are life. There's no such thing as the fairy tale where everything is just going to work out great because you think positive. You think positive in order to shape your life, but it takes work. And I think it's a really good example. Of course, I'm the author. I think it's a really good example of how we can shape our lives if we choose to.
Do you have family members or friends who critique your work before publication?
Well, I have a writers group that I started in 2002. We meet twice a month. So my writers group has heard every iteration of this novel there could possibly be, although most of them have never heard the last quarter of the novel. I kept that from them. That'll be a surprise. And as far as friends go that aren't writers, not until much later when I needed a little help with one more check for the punctuation and the grammar. But I did pay editors, and I believe that's very, very important to the process, to take it to an outside person who is a professional.
I can't agree more with that assessment. I hear that What We Set in Motion has won an award. Please tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, it did. I'm very, very honored to say that in 2013, I attended at the very end of the year, I attended Atlanta Writers Club Conference, and I won a Best Submission Award there. I was so thrilled to find that out. Normally, you stay after the conference, and they give the awards out in a ceremony, but my friend and I wanted to get back to Beaufort, which was 5 hours away, so we got in the car and left, and 2 days later, I learned that I had won an award through email.
Do you have any regrets for having left early?
No.
Is What We Set in Motion similar to anything else we may have read?
I don't think so. I haven't read everything that's out there, but the ones that hit the top of the list, I like the idea that it has a great story, but it has an underlying message to it as well that you come out with. And I can't think of anyone who's done anything like this.
Well, you mentioned that you hailed from Beaufort, South Carolina. You went to New York. You were in the dance world, and now you're back in Beaufort. Why did you decide to start writing?
Well, I had been writing way back when I was in high school. I was the assistant editor of the paper, and I was on the literary magazine. In fact, Pat Conroy and I were both division editors on the literary magazine. And then I dropped it because I let dance take me over. And I'd been dancing since I was 5, so it was a logical transition for me. And when I got back to Beaufort, and I got jobs here running nonprofit organizations, including an arts organization, I just said I need to do something on the side that is really important to me. And so I started doing short stories and essays and making scribblings about what I might, if I ever wrote a novel, what it might be in it. So it was very important to me to have that creative side going while I was doing regular day-to-day work.
You mentioned that Pat Conroy had recently passed. Did you have a chance to talk to him about your novel before his passing?
Actually, I did. I've talked to him several times about it, and he was always so supportive. It's just really wonderful to have somebody of that caliber who talks to you about your work just like they're your neighbor or your friend down the street. And so Pat and I did talk about it, yes.
That's got to be a very special memory for you.
It definitely is. It's a huge loss for so many, I was going to say thousands, it might even be millions of people who were fans of his.
Will you share one thing from your book that you want readers to remember?
Well, I think the most important thing is that choices are our destiny. And that's actually the quote at the beginning of the first chapter. I have a different quote at the beginning of each chapter. But choices are what shape us. And if we can, in fact, pay attention to the fact that we have choices and that we should honor the inner being within us that really does know which way to go next. We can't make our lives come out any way we want to specifically, but we can shape them by paying attention to our choices.
Please share with us some of the feedback you've received from readers of What We Set in Motion.
Well, I'm very honored that Kirkus Review has given me a lovely review. And basically, when we boiled it down, they said, Edwards writes superbly, a delightful and vivid, briskly moving, satisfying read. And then another review that I just got recently compared me to Anne Rivers Siddon and Nora Ephron. Anne Rivers Siddon being an extremely well-known Southern writer for a long time here, and of course Nora Ephron being just the ultimate of New York savvy to me. So I was thrilled about that review.
Where can we learn more about you, and where can we purchase What We Set in Motion?
My website is StephanieAustinEdwards.com, and that's Austin with an I. And then it can be purchased at online retailers and most bookstores. If you request it, they should be able to get it within a day or two.
In the couple of minutes we have left, will you share with our listeners something about What We Set in Motion that will be an incentive for them to purchase and read it?
I think the most important thing would be to find out whether or not Nadine Carter Barnwell has what it takes to do what it is that she wants to do. Her daddy is adamant that she can't do it. And so she has to muster up within her everything that is positive and assertive and glowing within her to try and get to the goal that she's looking for. So many people might want to try and go to the big city, and it could be in any kind of a business. It could be in finance, and it could be in real estate, and it could be in marketing. It doesn't matter. And some people do well right away. Some people get scared and leave early and go back home where it's safe. And some people stay too long. The question is, which one will Nadine be?
Stephanie, thank you so much for visiting with us today. I really appreciate your taking the time to share What We Set in Motion with us. I'm sure our listeners are as captivated by your storyline as I am. Will you come back to chat again when you release your next book?
I would love to.
Stephanie Austin Edwards' debut novel, What We Set in Motion, beautifully explores the tension between a young woman's need for freedom and her longing for connection. Filled with a rich cast of characters, starting with the wonderful protagonist, Nadine, whose love of dance takes her far from her childhood, this is a deeply compelling novel of loss and redemption, secrets and revelations, connections severed and restored. What a wonderful review I found on Stephanie's website. It makes me want to start reading right now. Nadine Carter Barnwell and her daddy have just had a huge fight about what she is allowed to do after college. Get rid of that boy, Nadine Barnwell. You are not moving to New York City, and that is final. Before I could say anything else, he snapped his paper closed and walked out of the room. I turned and clenched the back of the chair to try to keep from exploding. Then, spewing out of me like hot lava, I heard myself say what I had never let myself say before. You're not going to hold me here like a prisoner to your view of life. There's a new world out there beyond the South, and I'm going to dance whether you like it or not. His fading footsteps stopped. No, you are not, he shouted back. Then, as if invisible, hidden, or omnipotent, he called out from the shadows, If you go anyway, don't ever come back. I wanted to throw that same chair at him, but I didn't. Instead, I picked up my bag, slipped through the patio doors, and hurried across the manicured lawn. On the dock, I stopped, bent over, and took several deep breaths. The whole float rocked as my black lab, Bear, raced down the ramp and screeched to a halt at my feet. I felt and smelled his warm breath in my hair, heard his nails clicking as he stepped up and down in excitement. Then I lifted myself up and, with Bear at my heels, paced several lengths of the splintered planks, trying to push away my anger. A tightness settled in my chest and neck muscles, blocking my thinking. But after a few minutes, my focus returned, and as clear as a lightning bolt in the night sky, I knew what I had to do. I needed to get to Aunt Amelia right away and tell her what Daddy had just said, what I said. Ask her to help me figure out what, if anything, I could or should do next. If Daddy didn't care if I ever came back, I didn't care if he knew where I was going. But I did follow one more rule. After writing my destination on the covered chalkboard, a mandatory requirement for all boats leaving our dock, I quietly untied my bateau from its cleat, stepped in, and pushed off. Bear paced the dock, looking for a place to jump into the boat. No, you can't go this time. I'll be back tomorrow, I shouted as if he understood English. His sad eyes watched me float out into the creek without him. The boat drifted silently for several minutes before I pulled the cord on the Johnson 50 horsepower motor. There was just enough time to get to Camp Pinckney, a remote family fish camp on an island without roads or bridges, before the blackness of the sea islands set in. Tears clouded my vision as I steered the bateau through a series of creeks to get to more open water. I wiped my eyes with the back of my sleeve until my sight cleared up. Because the brackish water was so cloudy, it wasn't easy to know exactly where the deepest parts of the creek were. Depending upon the tide level, mud flats and oyster rakes could be just under the surface, waiting to catch a prop or a keel. Once caught, a boat could be kept firmly in place, stranded for many hours while the tide went all the way out and back in just enough to float once again. That's when I realized that if I wasn't careful, I was going to be stuck in the pluff mud forever, and no tide change was going to set my boat free. The sound of dolphin spray caught my attention. I turned in time to see 4 of them arcing out of the water in micro-intervals, then curving back down, nose first, like a line of synchronized swimmers diving into a pool. Daddy and I used to love to come out at feeding time and watch for dolphin pods. When I first asked what a pod was, he told me they were family. I knew what family meant to him, even if he had lost his ability to show love. Whenever he and his friends got together, they always fell into bragging bouts about who was the most Southern, who was the purest Beaufortonian. According to Daddy, his grandfather, Ebenezer Barnwell, went through hell and back, determined to regain the empire he and his family built and then lost. My great-grandfather, grandfather, and great-uncles worked tirelessly to rebuild their lives. They had a vision and an unwavering focus stemming from an understandable fire of hatred and revenge. How many times have I heard this story? But couldn't Daddy see that war was long over, the empire rebuilt? Now he owned and managed much of the property in the town and even more throughout the county. He had what he wanted, and his work suited him perfectly. Now it's my turn, I shouted into the wind. I want my own life and my own vision. A seagull swooped in toward me before turning direction at the last second and landing on top of an empty dock piling stacked with other birds. Their freedom and grace pulled at my being. Within 15 minutes, I was in the widest part of the river, headed to a place almost as far away from civilization and Daddy as I could get. Sitting on a hummock of land on a deep, swiftly flowing river, edged on two sides by green-feathered marsh, and to the rear by a density of coastal trees and shrubs, this camp was a refuge from the increasing demands and early signs of encroaching civilization on our quiet southern town. The camp itself was nothing more than an expanded lean-to, haphazardly upgraded over the years, closely resembling a sharecropper's shack. I came to this place with Daddy 100 times over the years, back when we were close. Now it remained the only part of him I still understood. A half an hour after leaving home, I arrived at the fish camp. After tying up the boat, I walked toward the house, aware of the familiar sounds of nature that surrounded me as the darkness swallowed their shapes. Aunt Amelia, my mother's only sister, and her husband, Uncle Hamp, were already there waiting for me. They were staying at the camp for one last weekend before heading to their second home near Asheville, North Carolina. This unusual couple lived only 2 houses down from me my whole life. I was at their house almost as much as mine, mostly because they loved and accepted me without reservation. I could tell them anything. Back when Mama still had her sense of humor, in her less oppressive years, we often joked that I was actually Aunt Amelia's child, birthed through my mother's womb. Diminutive in stature like Mama, my aunt met me at the door, studied my face for a moment, and gave me a long, strong hug. She was an Earth Mother herbalist who almost always wore loose khaki pants, a long gauze blouse, and her pewter and enamel amulet necklace to keep trouble away with a client who believed in her. "You look upset," she said. "Go sit on the porch and I'll be there in a minute." I nodded. In the kitchen, I heard Uncle Hamp, a tall, gangly, jolly man about 50 years old, clanging pots, dropping utensils, and letting out an intermittent "damn it" while he prepared his seafood specialty, frogmore stew. As her business, production, and delivery manager, he was her rock in every aspect of her life, she often told me. Aunt Amelia soon came out, carrying cups of tea. Whenever there was something significant going on, Aunt Amelia brewed her special tea. Even if it was 100 degrees outside, she believed in the tea's healing power. After handing a cup to me, she sat in the weather-beaten rocker next to mine. Dusk was a reverent time of day for us, and we respected and participated in the growing darkness with our silence. Only a few hundred yards away, across another hammock of land, we heard the rhythmic movement of the ocean caressing the shoreline to the east. In the distance, the unmistakable plop, plop of deer hooves in wet marsh drew my attention to their outlines as they moved single file near the maritime forest. A breeze rustled leaves in the giant live oaks that clung to the land like a mother to her child. I sensed nature settling in for the evening all around me. But I was far from settling. I still churned from Daddy's words and mine. Each incoming wave in its retreat entered into the pulse of my body. Aunt Amelia broke the silence. "What did he say, Nadine?" she asked, still looking out into the darkness. Her graying shoulder-length hair, lifted to her shoulders by a magenta bandana, made her look more like a queen than my aunt. The short version? He said no. I took a sip from my cup. "That's all?" she asked. "No, of course not. Sam Barnwell didn't talk long, but he was quite clear." I mimicked his voice, repeating his angry words. "First, he said I wasn't talented enough. Second, that I'm not moving to New York City. And third, to get rid of that boy." I paused, barely able to form the next words. "And fourth, if I left anyway, not to ever come back." Feeling the slap of those words all over again, I wrapped both hands around the warm mug, put my feet up on the wood slat in the center of the screen porch, and rocked.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. To contact us, call toll-free 1-877-955-8800. That's 877-955-8800. Or visit theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.